welcome to our Free West Media channel. And don't forget to please subscribe to the channel. Click on the subscribe button and the bell symbol in the right-hand corner of the screen. And of course, you can also read our daily news updates on freewestmedia.com. If you don't speak Italian or French or Dutch or German, that's probably the only English channel, English language website in the world where you have daily updates about what's going on in the whole of Europe and, of course, the United States. But with me is Dr. Pieter Mulder, a veteran South African politician. He's been in Parliament for 30 years. He's seen it all. He's seen the South African Revolution happen in 1994. His father was also a minister in the old government. So he's very well versed in everything to do with South African politics. He also wrote a book with the Afrikaans title, Kan die Afrikaners toi toi, which loosely translated means, can Afrikaners protest? Because toi toi is a form of black protest in South Africa. And in the book, he mentions something very interesting, and that is that within African culture, the principle of non-contradiction that holds sway in the West is not as strong, or it actually is not respected a lot of the time. So you can say one thing to a certain audience and then another thing to another audience, and it's not perceived as being contradictory or duplicitous or anything like that. Is that not correct, Dr. Mulder?
Yes, there's the dream that everything is the same, we're all the same, and I've learned more than once that I have to adapt. For one example, I like to use sarcasm and use humor in my speeches, and I had to stop it after 94 because we differ. What's from humor for me is not necessarily accepted the same on the other side, and maybe they receive it differently. Let me give you an example. Hansard is a very important document. It comes from the British system where every word that's spoken in Parliament is written down, and then you can go back and say, but last year you said this. Why are you saying something different today? And we made more than one speech before 94. On quoting from Hansard, Mr. de Klerk, you said this, why are you now changing it? Now, after 94, Hansard is just not important anymore. It is still there. I think they're 2, 3, 4 years behind. And when you ask them why, they said, but why do you want all these on record? And I saw that in practice, where in the beginning, just after 1994, Mr. Dr. Buthelezi was still in cabinet at that stage as the leader of the IFP, and he made a speech in Ulundi for the youth league of the Inkatha Freedom Front, Freedom Party. And he said terrible things about Mandela. This is a problem, and that is a problem, Mandela this, and it was reported on TV. So the Monday morning, I said, well, that's the end of working together in cabinet. There's no way that he can still go in there and be accommodated after what he said. And we started Parliament at 2 o'clock, and he wasn't there. But Buthelezi was there. I said, well, I think he's gone already. He's been fired already. And then 2:30, he came in, and he greeted Mr. Mandela, comrade, and all friendly, and came to his seat. So I asked some of the IFP members, how does it work? And he said, no, you don't understand. He spoke at Ulundi, and that situation asked for those words. This Parliament asked for different words. The call for other words was wearing, and Mandela understands that, and Buthelezi understands that. Now, from my perspective, what you say is important, what you said is important, and it counts. Words may be used differently. It's been used for good relations, for good whatever, and that makes a very big difference. And that's why Hansard is not that important anymore, and you must totally different argue. Even going into a contract, that writes down the power relations at that moment. But that can change within a year, and everything is new, and that makes you very nervous when you start to negotiate with that as a background here.
Yes, I'm also thinking of the famous phrase from the ANC's Freedom Charter from 1955, South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And I think that was taken up in the new constitution as well.
Yes.
But, do they really attach the same meaning to that as us? Because a lot of the more radical black politicians in South Africa, that they've got the notion that Africa is for the Africans, and we are simply another category of citizen here because we come from Europe. And so in actual fact, the idea expressed by South Africa belongs to all who live in it is not consistently applied in their thinking.
Well, Mbeki was one of those that used the Freedom Charter and saying this, I'm an African, etc. And then I said the same. I said, well, my grandfather came here in 1680, so I'm an African, although I'm then a white African. But then they got this definition that tried to get by with you. No, you are settlers of a different kind. And with that, he explained it that we had the settlers, the French in West Africa, the Portuguese in Africa. And once there was freedom or Huru, from their perspective, they went back to Europe. But we were too stupid to leave, so we stayed behind, and so we tolerate you. And that is sort of a way of explaining it in a certain sense. And then you get Malema at the moment that says, well, you don't belong technically here, you must go back to Europe. And I once reacted and said, right, sure, then immediately I'm going to have a campaign to have all blacks out of Europe. No, that's not acceptable. Right? And that's immediately discrimination and racial whatever, racism. So it's sort of that double standard. You must accept all the immigrants coming over from Africa. That's sort of human. But the other way around, we won't accept you here. And I argue that all the time. This is my country. And the difference is you can be a colonialist in Africa, meaning there are white people in Kenya or whatever who lives there and quite have a good to the world. But the problem from my point is they maybe have their money in Europe. They go for holiday in Spain. The children go to school in England, but they stay and make a good living in Africa. I want more than that. I want to have a community here, meaning my own language, my own culture, everything. And this must still be accepted. And I would argue they say, if you accept the Arabs in the north of Africa with their own culture and language as Africans, then surely, and I'm not talking as an Afrikaner, the Afrikaner or the whites can also be accepted in the south of Africa. But I'm afraid we're not yet there, because they need a scapegoat for all the mistakes they make, and at the moment we are the scapegoats, and that's a dangerous situation.
Yes, correct. And it reminds me a little bit about a statement by Eshel Rudy, I think in the 1970s. He also spoke about I think he wrote a book at the time, and he spoke about the three Africas. There's Northern Africa, the Maghreb, Muslim Africa, and then there's Sub-Saharan Africa, and then South Africa was a third Africa where we have a highly westernized society. But it seems to me that idea has never really taken flight. And yes, as you put it there, it leaves us with this dilemma that we are white Africans, we are indigenous to South Africa.
The fascinating part is the president that was the best on this issue was Zuma. He was the only one that said, no, you're a tribe of Africa. That was his wording. You also accept it, and because you don't have a second passport. So in that sense, I could argue with him, and we both could criticize Europe in a certain sense with that common ground. But all the other problems around Zuma. But Mbeki was the intellectual, trying to do it with the settlers of a different kind, while Zuma as a Zulu was very easy, say 1, 2, 3, that's the way you're another tribe and I'm a Zulu, and that's it. If I may just add, Mr. Ramaphosa, his problem in a certain sense is he's a Venda. And Venda are one of the smallest tribes in South Africa. So the first thing he did after he was elected, he went to the Zulu king, because he needs that power base, and he can never play that card, the ethnic card, because that is not good for him. He must go for this broader sort of reality of South Africa, and not for the tribal one, yeah.
Yes, I've also heard the term used, a super tribe. That the different tribes in South Africa now have formed a super tribe.
Yeah.
And then,
the reality of that is the poor Africa must accept first the colonial borders. And the African Union accepted the colonial borders being forced on them, Africa being the only continent with ruler-line straight borders. But there's no correction between the realities of Africa language-wise and those borders. But then once inside that border, now you must create this new nation-building technique, and they're all struggling to get the right recipe for nation-building with different languages and cultures in artificial countries.
Exactly. Well, that was a very interesting conversation. Thank you very much, Dr. Pieter Mulder, the veteran parliamentarian and former leader of the Freedom Front Plus party in South Africa. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You're also going to see our logo appearing on the screen now. You can also click on that and subscribe, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you very much.